Hey, here's what we're talking about today. So Kirstyn comes up with this great idea. Kirstyn, are you here somewhere?
Yes,
Like,
I made it back from my crazy dash to drop
there
kids
you
off.
are. There you are. You look better this way than from your, your gear shift when you were racing home. Thank you for driving safely and taking care of your children as a responsible parent. Um, Kirstyn said, "Hey, can we just do kind of it's a topic that there's really no I've got all the answers. You all need to listen to me because I've fixed it. It's a moving target at best, and I thought it's a great idea. I mean, we have had a fair share of conversations around technologies and some things that maybe were in learning mode and listening mode more. It's time to get back to one that's kind of the full blown Brady Bunch where we're all on camera and sharing our thoughts around this because there is no one answer, certainly for retention. I think if you figured you had it made last year, you may be onto a new path this year. Recruitment, that's always a challenge, but it does seem like we're hearing more and more these days of the recruitment, the funnel's working, but they're not sticking for some reason. So I'd like to dive into that. And again, whether you're on the consulting side or you're like Jadine on the operations side or anywhere in between, your perspectives are welcome. We want to know what you're hearing out there and what you think are maybe some solutions to the challenges at face. So Kirstyn, thank you for being brave enough to lead this conversation. I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, look, my pleasure. And I know a few of the faces on here, and I've been in and around the CCNG organization since about 2007 when I moved from Australia with a global staffing company. And we used to run a lot of events in person, and it was a great time. And things change, and it's great to see that the every meeting I get on, I feel like there's more people. So my background is in staffing as well as business consulting. So I started in HR and decided to go into the staffing world for 6 months in, 2002, and figured that all of the recruiters that I were working with were lying, cheating scumbags, except if you're Corey or I, right? We're different. And so I think that's the big difference that I found is that I was doing light industrial staffing, I was doing some customer service, some inside sales, finance, engineering, and no matter what we said to an agency, they could fill it, right? But they never did. And so it was an interesting journey going down that path. So I said, look, I'm going to go and do staffing for 6 months and then come back to HR, and never really went back. So I've done legal recruiting, accounting, finance, executive. When I quit my corporate job 2.5 years ago, can you believe it's that long? My main mission was to work with companies who treat people right, because I also have a consulting business that focuses on organizational culture and leadership effectiveness. And how do you generate and grow and build highly effective teams that are achievement oriented? And that's like, how do we get people to actually achieve the goals, right? Because we have people that show up. How do we get them to do that? So it's been a fun journey. When I left, I was running 3 countries in the height of the pandemic for shipping and logistics vertical, which was kind of interesting. So anything with shipping and logistics, whether it be the actual warehouse, whether it be call center, whether it be the CFO, all of that ran into my organization. And I was doing Puerto Rico, Canada, and the US. And so I was running about $100 million of temp staffing spend. And the technical word was it was a shit show, right? Trying to get people to get off the couches, to take calls, to, come in and move packages, you name it, it was tough to do. And so we all lived through that and we all survived it. But what it taught us is that people don't think they ever have to go back into a brick and mortar again, because they proved that they could do it remotely during the pandemic. Is anyone, with a show of hands, those on camera, who's having that battle still now with the magnitude of positions?
They're all lying. They all are.
Right. And so that's kind of what's been the interesting turn over the last, 3 years, is that everyone now thinks that regardless what the position is, they can do it remotely. But what happens when you have remote workers doing that is you're losing the culture, right? You're losing the camaraderie. You're losing the nesting periods to be, hey, let's sit and listen and learn. And you're losing some of what made the contact center, call center, whichever way you call it, vibrant, right? And it was that whole people stayed because they liked the people that they worked with. Now, how do you get them to like you when you never see them, right? And companies in HR departments, how many of you are in HR versus in the actual operations? Anybody?
No, I don't think we do. Maybe one or two. I'm looking at the names.
Right. And so what's happened is HR has seen this light of recruiting and retention in these fields as, well, we can get a cheaper workforce if we go to Virginia, Minnesota, or somewhere in Ohio or somewhere. But what they're realizing is that as a contact center supervisor or a manager, it's really tough, because not only do you have organizational culture playing in, you've got town culture, city culture, state culture of how they operate and how they work, not to mention state laws. That then, one person gets a meal penalty after 8 hours and the other one gets safe and sick time. Is all this resonating with everybody? It has remote workers.
Yep.
So that's really what we've been digging into on our consultancy side and our staffing side. And I look at like two kind of industries that operate very similar, is the warehousing, light industrial, and contact center. Because for the most part, you need people to show up. There are exceptions where they can do the work remotely, but when we look at how do we get people to show up and what the turnover rates are, what we've been advising a number of clients lately is to look at who is attriting at a higher percentage rate than you are. Who knows the highest industry turnover right now and what that percentage looks like? Anyone want to have a stab at it?
I'm guessing it's over 100% annually.
Yeah, it's at about, the highest one is like 133% is how they look at it, or they say, the 33% turnover is healthcare. Right? Followed by, what's the next industry that we're seeing?
Banking.
No, they keep showing up because they get to work from home. It's customer service and retail, followed by logistics and manufacturing.
I'm sure
so
hospitality's got to be there somewhere, because
yeah, the customer service and that whole customer service retail is that hospitality in there as well.
Yep.
But what we've found is that with the three top industries that are attriting at the highest rate and are having issues with retention, the one common theme that we've figured out is that they all have to show up to work. Right? So if you're in healthcare, for the most part, you have to show up. If you're in retail, you're in hospitality, you're in call center for the most part, customer service in general, or in manufacturing and warehousing, they're jobs that have to show up. So we're telling our manufacturing clients and our customer service clients is, how transferable are healthcare skill sets to you? How transferable are warehousing and manufacturing skill sets to you? How do you take people who are attriting at a higher rate than what they are for you? Or how do you start to make your environment different, that people want to come to you if they're leaving a competitor? And what are the target markets? Because the other part is, you take somebody from a direct competitor. Are they bringing bad habits with them? Are they bringing good habits with them? The other part that we've talked a lot about lately, and then I'll be quiet and ask you guys to raise your issues. The other thing that we've been looking at in manufacturing, in contact center, in hospitality, and a number of different areas is the fact that, what is the path forward in sales roles as well? What is the path forward for somebody? You come in and you're a really good contributor and you're a really good producer. And so you get promoted to a team leader or a supervisor. Have I been asked if I want to be a supervisor or a team lead? And have I been given the skill sets to be able to do it really well? Or do I just get criticized because my production and my handle times and everything else has started to detract, because now all of a sudden I've got to figure out how to herd cats? And I don't like cats very much, right? And you get these people into team lead and supervisor roles that don't actually like people very much. And they don't know how to lead them, and they don't want to lead them, let alone manage them. And all of these people were my friends. Now they don't invite me to the bar because I'm their boss.
JD, and you're nodding. That's not the part you should be nodding. I want to come back.
I just completely agree with everything that she said.
I knew that was where you were going. Hey, Daniel Roth, are you on? I don't see your face, but I see your name. Unmute.
Hey, David, I'm on.
Okay, so when Kirstyn was talking about, you've got a remote workforce, and now you have to engage with them, and you don't see them. For everyone on this call, Daniel, and I'll let you explain it in detail, but he works 100% remotely as the boss.
Mm-hmm.
So Daniel, take 2 seconds and share with us how that's set up, because it kind of fits into that conversation. I'd be very interested in your perspective on how do you connect with people when you're physically not seeing them?
Sure. First, Kirstyn, I agree with so much that you're sharing here. It's such a critical conversation to be able to have and be able to talk to like-minded folks that are dealing with the same issues. So I just want to acknowledge first this, David, thanks for inviting me here to be part of this. So my background, I work for a company called Dispatch Health, and we are a healthcare delivery service. We are a replacement for urgent care providing services in the care and comfort of someone's home. And so we have clinicians on staff and our own fleet of cars. And we bring the doctor to you. We bring the nurse practitioner to you. We also have a telehealth component and an advanced care or 30-day episodic component, much more complex, higher acuity issues. So yeah, I'm 100% remote. I've been at Dispatch Health since October 2021. And what I've found that helps most is engagement as a leader. So if I want my team to be engaged, then I must be engaged. Do as I do, not as just I say, is very important in this type of environment. At least that's my finding. And so what does that look like? That looks like weekly one-on-ones with my leadership, and also skip levels, weekly one-on-ones with the skip levels, or bi-weekly, depending on the need. In addition to that, standing team meetings. When we have an issue or a specific focus area, we will go to 15-minute stand-ups in the mornings. Before it gets kind of crazy and everyone gets pulled in many directions. In addition to that, we use Monday.com to manage large projects. So we are a Lean Six Sigma shop, and so I lead Black Belt projects with my teams. And I've found using Monday.com, being able to collaborate within the tool. Some organizations use Slack, and others, we also are Microsoft Teams. But high engagement I found very helpful. The other thing is authenticity as a leader. Being authentic with my team, it is very possible on the phone. I'm sure we've all experienced this, where we're being shared something, whether we have video, the other person has video on or off, that you get a sense of whether they're being authentic or not in their communication, if they're giving you the full set of information or holding back. Well, same thing with our teams. They can experience that as well. And if they feel like we're holding back or I'm inauthentic, then they're going to start to exhibit those behaviors as well. So I look for ways to measure engagement as well. We have our KPIs, just like all of you do. And if I see a significant change in KPI performance, want to get on top of that within the week, if not quicker, depends on what the KPI is, and engage with that individual and just check in with them. Hey, I see this performance has changed. This is not your typical you. Just want to check in and just see how things are. And I've learned all kinds of things that way. I'm sure some of you have as well, where someone's getting ready to looking to buy a house. They need more income, so they're driving Uber Eats at night. They're getting ready to have a baby, and the wife is nauseous, and so they're taking more time and their attention is more in that area, or 100 other reasons. So it's about getting to know our people. The last part is team builders. So virtual happy hours still work. One of my teams, what they've done is they work together. They're about a team of 15. And what they do is they work together to pick a piece of art that they're going to go paint. And so what they do is the company pays for the supplies. We ship it out after the artwork is picked by the team. It's basically blind voting. And then after that, time is set up, a 3-hour block time is set up to be able to just be on the phone while they're painting. Digital, you have to be on camera, and depends on the team if you want to have some libations or not. That's up to you and your culture. But they do that over a few sessions. And so they get to talk, they talk work, they talk personal, and get to know each other. And then they have a memory, something in their house that they've painted themselves that they're proud of, or laugh about if they're not great painters, right?
I'd be laughing at myself if I tried to paint something.
and then they have something to remember and anchor them to their team and the work. So shared
and to be clear,
experiences.
are all of your I'm sorry, before you summarize, all of your teams remote?
100% of my team's remote at this point. Yes. We
And 100%
have a
of the managers are remote, right?
Yeah, we have headquarters in Denver, and we do have a few leaders in Denver. That's where our corporate office is, but there's literally no one in the corporate office associated with the call center. We might have a team biannual or annual meeting in the office where we'll bring the leaders in and have a week-long session that's highly planned out for value add.
Yeah, and that's so. I have a question for you, if you're open to sharing. My family uses a concierge medical service, very similar because of the long wait times, and around here, some of the urgent care is closed, so it's all emergency. What, if you're willing to share, what is your hourly pay rate for your individuals?
Yeah, so our hourly pay rate, it ranges. So it's remote, so we're domestic and Philippines. But in the domestic side, it's anywhere from about $17.50 up to $22 an hour, depending on their tier, their experience, right? And if they're bilingual, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. So there's a key factor, guys, too, of how you can have success in remote. Pay rates matter, right? If you're paying $15, $16, $15.50, and try and do remote as well, I'm assuming that Dan's got an educated workforce, given that you're in the healthcare, what you're doing. And that's something that if you're in those competitive pay rates and your representatives, and I'm not trying to say that some are better than others, but you know what I mean? Like if you're paying less than McDonald's, because some of us have to, can you then trust that they're going to have the environment at home to set them up for success? Are they going to have a separate room? Are they going to have the technology, the highest bandwidth of internet, right? The fact that his team are engaged and wanting to paint together and do those things is absolutely phenomenal. And some of you will be able to create that. Some of you just won't be able to because of the landscape of your talent base and, issues within the company being able to do that in those states, because they could then be paid after, it could be then considered work time, even though it's not. But I think if we could get to where Dan is, that would be an amazing place for retention, right? And it's a great recruiting story to say, hey, we're dealing with this. We're making a difference in our clients' lives. We're doing something that matters.
Kirstyn, do you think that there's even more attention now on pay rates? Because if you take the work environment at a high level, I think of Jadine and the Alcon campus, and boy, I'd love to work in a building like that. It's got a beautiful cafeteria. God only knows what else they have now, but I mean, it's gorgeous. So you got that going for you. But if I live in Plano, not so much because of the commute. So do you think that the facility and the location, which was once an attraction, that's been neutralized, as well as the commute has been neutralized? Does that put more focus or attention on pay? And I'd also like to hear what other people think.
Yeah, I think it is. Plano has a good cricket team. If anyone lives in Plano in Texas, they play cricket.
And we're off to the cricket side.
But I think that's a big part of it, is that why should I show up for a pay rate that if I'm going to show up, I can get more if I'm doing something else, right? And so pay rates is always going to be a thorn in our spine in this industry. and it's how do we get the businesses to understand the worth of our people and to pay them, but also as the supervisors, the managers, the leaders, how do they value your worth, and in what measures of retention and recruiting can you tie into your role to make you stand out as of what you're doing is giving them an ROI that's not in the numbers, right? I talked to an investment firm the other day. I was doing a training for them, and what they didn't understand is the actual cost of turnover, right, at any level, because when the numbers, they've got their projections and it's, oh, we're going to buy it for this, we're going to sell it for this, we're going to have it for this. But they're merging, when they're doing mergers too, which culture was better? Have you done the assessments before you try and blend them through? Have you spoken to the people who are key stakeholders in the environmental factor of the organization and the culture? And they just don't. And so I think that's where, yes, the pay rates are still going to be there. People don't want to have to drive in if they don't want to. Gas prices are higher. All of that plays in that is, and then you get some of the older generation, and I'm in the older generation now. So if you're over 35, you're in the older generation. I keep getting told by people, where we like to go in and see people and we like to go and work. And there's this whole population that if you're not targeting folks that are, late 40s through to, early 60s that are sick of dealing with the higher pressure jobs, and they're on that dial down phase, and they're looking for something where they can show up and make a difference, but they want to go into the office. That's a population you want to try and hire too.
Daniel's got his hand up.
Yeah. I'll add there's things around pay rate that can be done as well that to think about. So there's just foundational items. None of this is going to be a surprise per se as I share it here, but think about your organization and how dialed in this part of your organization is, and that is there clear pathway for advancement for an individual? Is there clear things that they can do and then become someone trained in waiting versus, right? Just so that way they feel like they're being recognized for their work. They know that you know them and that they want a greater future for themselves, and that your business is a place to be able to support them in that. I find that to be absolutely critical. In addition to that, I have found that utilizing a variable pay component, when I do have lower pay team members, $15, $15.50, $15.65, things like that, having a variable pay component based on performance, so that there's usually a clear ROI discussion that can be brought back to finance if there's a variable component. But I found that as a way to work around the budget that I've been given, or that I have, is to go to variable pay and pay for performance, basically. Also, how often are you communicating with them as a team? Are there town halls? Do they feel like they know what's going on in the business? That's also, I found, super critical. And then the last thing and then I'll stop talking, is their systems. So if someone is on the lower socioeconomic side to be able to, and working for us, are we giving them the tools and do they work well? In other words, when they do go sit down to go work, is the headset good? Is their computer or laptop, is their key right? Is the connection good? Some of that they have to own and make sure, but how do you enable them as an organization in those areas? Because if the work is difficult to actually do, I found that drives disengagement. If they feel like that they're not being heard around like our organization, we provide headsets specifically. And so if their headset starts to go bad and we start to hear things on calls and on quality, we're calling them out for that. And then they start to disengage because they're like, I don't control that. That's not something I can do. So really making sure the equipment is up to par and helps to empower.
Absolutely. And double screens, dual monitors. You see people that get laptops to work on, and it's tough because they're staring at it all day and they're trying to juggle through screens, and that's on premise or off premise, right? It can be tough. I see Adam also has his hand raised.
Which he never does. So this is kind of a momentous occasion.
I thought I'd try it. Yeah, thanks for calling on me.
Now we just have to teach him how to take his hand down.
Yeah, I don't know how to do that part. I'll get to it after I talk. But I just wanted to commend Daniel and Kirstyn really because a big piece of this, I always talk about operationalizing it. And I had this long conversation with a guy. He was a supervisor that just did a whole presentation on his mandatory or not. Yeah, I guess they were mandatory fun Fridays. Like he has a conference call every Friday, 100% remote team, so they can get everybody together and they can just talk about fun stuff, right? And they do these activities. And what I was telling him is that I'm a strong believer in operationalizing all the things that create a strong culture. And he's like, well, that seems weird. Why would you operationalize? I'm like, that is your Friday. You've got it set for a certain time every Friday for that purpose. Just like your painting class, I just think that's a great one because it's building camaraderie. And I love the idea that it now hangs on your wall and I'll always remember that we had that moment together, right? Brilliant stuff. But operationalizing all the things that really drive the things that make great cultures, like you said, the communication with the town hall and the camaraderie building and all those different things. And the other thing I just wanted to make a note about pay was that if you ever read that book, Daniel Pink wrote a book called Drive, and he talks about the three or four things that are really just intrinsic that drive all of us, regardless of age, right? But he does make a very strong caveat on the front end that if pay is not commensurate with the market, then that's going to be too distracting for anybody to get over and into any of the other motivators.
Yeah,
Okay.
it absolutely is.
Hey, you took my hand down. Thank you.
And then we have Chris is looking at, so he's new to his organization. They're currently running hybrid for support while the rest of the company is remote first. He's new to the company as the VP of support. He's ran remote teams prior to going to his new role and not opposed to it. The interesting challenge is convincing some of the leadership that remote can be successful in a full remote world. The impact that this will have on the culture. I think too, a big part about it is whoever's making those decisions, what has been their issue in the past, right? There's an underlying, if someone's really opposed to it at the senior leadership, everyone has 12 thinking styles, right? Your 12 thinking styles drive your behavior. So it's trying to understand that when the opposing behavior comes out to and this can be whether you're trying to take your team remote or whether you're trying to change a KPI or you're trying to do anything, the biggest thing that will come out is the opposition, right? The opposite in your thinking styles to opposition is your humanistic and encouraging, where people lean into conflict, lean into opposing conversations, hear you out, want the facts, want to know that. A lot of time when people are opposing, there's something that's driving their thinking that they've been burnt in the past, right? So it's really getting to that root cause of why the no? Why not the conversation? Why not the trial? Why not some of that stuff? And this is what I teach executives all over the world with, because you see their thinking styles when they do the assessments, and the first thing they go to is no. But why? And as an employee, if you ask them, but why, they get really pissed off, right? Because then they think that you are undermining them and that, you're being, an a-hole. But really, when we tie it to the facts around, we can potentially pay less, right? We can get people who are really well versed in it. Hey, I've managed remote teams before. I know how to work it. I know how to build the culture. I think my biggest thing would be, for Chris, figure out why your team is the way it is, or you could find the person that you replaced hated the thought of remote work.
Yeah, there's a combination of those things, and I love the question on the test in the chat. We're actually running a test right now, and I'm going to apologize really quick. I'm at one of my BPO sites in Colombia, and our internet's been a little spotty here and there, but just the guest Wi-Fi, the stuff where all the workers are just fine. But I think your point is extremely valid. What I have found in some of my discussions, and I love, Kirstyn, that you're calling out, and Dan, your points about listening, being empathetic, connecting with your teams, I think are all keys to some of the things that that I've been trying to navigate, not just in the change that I'm trying to drive with the potential move to remote support, but just being the new VP of this support organization. But some of the challenges are previous leadership was completely opposed. The other thing was the metrics that were being leveraged. We had about 25 different KPIs that were being considered the most important metrics. And one of the things that I've shifted to that has seemed to help to alleviate some of the concern is a focus on the metrics that drive customer outcomes. So we're moving to what I call a core 4. We still measure and track adherence in different areas and things like that, but the core 4 metrics has changed people's attitudes and the ability they think that they can drive success with remote teams. So there's a lot to be seen. Like I had mentioned, I have ran remote teams very successfully. A lot of those were forced into it because of the pandemic, and so you just kind of had that attitude of, well, you know what, everyone's doing it, well, you got to do it. This one's a little bit different for me. I'm surprised. I've got some teams within support that it's a large organization. I've got 250 people globally, but some teams are all in. They're like, yes, we live in Atlanta. We don't want to drive an hour for 7 miles, right? Some teams don't have, some of our locations don't have those commute concerns as much, and they want to be in person. They don't want to lose that contact. So trying to balance that has been interesting, because the leader in me knows where we need to go, and it's the right thing to do from an organizational perspective. I can see the strategy from an executive leadership perspective and where that's going. It's just trying to get the team on board, and I don't want to lose that great thing that we have as from a culture perspective, but I also know that there's going to have to be a little give and take, some of the trade-offs that come.
Absolutely. And you hit a key point too. When we look at KPIs, are they key performance indicators of your people, or are they key performance indicators of where your company is doing things wrong, right? Because when we look at KPIs and we're holding people to this accountability, are we measuring on things that are actually measuring not only their faults, but their successes? Because when you talk to a number of contact center agents, they see KPIs as trying to find what they're doing wrong, right? They're not measures, and they're not tools that are ever celebrated to say, hey, great work, you guys got 96% satisfaction. It's, oh, we missed it by 4%. So a big part about culture is, what are we measuring, right? What are we measuring each person for? What are we doing with that measure? And are we focusing on the negative of the measurement, or are we focusing on the positive of the measurement? Or are we doing a balance of the two? And are we measuring stuff that is irrelevant to the business? Right? Because when those measures come out and those QC calls get monitored, okay, you might have gone too long. But how is the tone? How is your empathy for the client? What are those other things that we could be telling you that you're doing right as we're telling you that you're doing it wrong? You know, I saw some survey data in the last 6 months that showed, you know, a big part about why people leave this industry as well as retail is because they feel like all they ever get is negativity from feedback about them, whether it be customers. And who's using NPS scores for your agents from the external world? Anybody? You know, someone asked me in a leadership training, how many times, if the service is good and you're happy with it, do you give it a 7? Sometimes, right? Because you've also got people that live in this world that think that nothing's perfect. So now we're holding our contact center agents and our retail folks and other people in organizations to this scale that 8 is, anything below an 8 is a failure. But think about, when you rate something, how often do we give it an 8, a 9, or a 10? You know, it's got to be knock out of the park, great, or you get the people who someone can say thank you and they give them a 10. That's something that I would look at too, is how much weight are we putting on an NPS, and are we, so I was in the staffing world for many, many years, have my own staffing company now, I don't measure any of that stuff, right? It's on retention rate when clients fire us, which thankfully we haven't had any in 2.5 years. But in the corporate world, we would get something, and the hard stop was this 8, right? 8, 9, and 10 is what you need. What I would do is I'd spend more time looking at the 5, 6, and the 7s to see how do I get them to an 8 in their mind, right? Because my recruiters, my salespeople, my ops people took it personally when they got a 7. But you get a 7 with a comment that says, amazing service provided by Hannah today. You know, Tony did miraculous things for us. So then I would call the customer and say, help me understand why you're giving Hannah a 6 or a 7 when you're saying that she's got, you know, impeccable delivery rates, and educating the customer on what the NPS actually means. That, hey, anything below an 8, you're basically telling me that Hannah sucks, right? And they're like, oh my God, I'm so sorry, I'm shocked. So we're using these measures, whether it be KPIs, whether it be NPS, but are we taking the time to also educate the agents, you know, the employees, the clients, on what does this NPS mean? And what do the KPIs mean? And what are the good, the bad, the ugly, and the awesome out of KPIs? And how much time do we spend talking about the awesome versus the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? Because that all builds retention. And when you tell somebody, when you have a bad customer experience, you tell 10 people. When you're an employee and you get told that you've done an awesome job, you tell 10 people, right? So all of a sudden that motivates the employees around them for their one-on-ones, because they know, hey, guess what? There is positivity that comes from this. It's not all negative. Because a lot of the times when we're doing those QC reviews, we're focusing on what went wrong. We're not necessarily focusing on what went right. And that's the piece that a little bit of that positivity goes so far with individuals, because they don't get it a lot. Now, your centers might be different, but from the vast majority, and when I was doing a high volume of contact center recruiting, I went and became a certified call center manager to understand the business behind the business, and toured a ton of centers. And then I was with Kelly Services for many years, and we ran the Kelly Connect program. So I traveled all over the US going into different places. And the common theme for year after year after year was the, you know, bashing that we give people in the QCs versus and, you know, start with a positive, give them the negative, finish with a positive. There should be a positive light somewhere in it. David?
Yeah, just a couple quick comments. One, I move all my clients off Net Promoter Score. I'm not a big fan of it. As I've talked in the past, I think too many numbers to not have, as you mentioned, a real understanding of what's the difference between a 4 and a 5 or a 6 and a 7 and all that. And I think people get caught up in the wrong stuff on that and focus just on the number. But probably more importantly, one of the things that I have found to be a real positive motivator is, do you listen to your agents? Do you have a mechanism in place where if they hear feedback on a product improvement or a constant complaint that they're hearing over and over, do they have an avenue to raise that and actually be listened to and have it go into your continuous improvement process? Because more often than not, I hear, you know, I'd say, hey, you need to tell your management this when I'm talking to a call center, and their answer is, well, would you go online and fill out a form? They don't listen to us. And, you know, that to me is a huge demotivator for any call center person if they don't feel like they can actually make an impact. And they are your eyes and ears. They are your, you know, they gather information. And so that to me is a big part of creating an environment where they really are excited to come to work every day, because they feel like they're going to make a difference with what they do and they can improve your company's product or service. Yeah.
And there's also, you know, we've got a client who does, so when you're on the staffing agency side, and if you've used staffing agencies to fill any of your positions, you'll often get what's called a QC question. Like, can you judge the agent based on, or the temporary employee in any aspect, on productivity, performance, interpersonal skills, whatever it might be. So we've got a client that does a QC assessment on themselves with their employees every month. Like, you know, how motivated are you to come to work? How much do you enjoy? And it is truly anonymous, right? So it's got the field where you can put your name or not put your name, and they can't track it back to your, you know, your computer or anything. And it's leaning in and being vulnerable enough to want to know what your people actually think about you, right? And it doesn't cost anything. It's a Google Doc that you just do a QC on your own company. You're not asking for supervisors to be thrown under the bus if they're not doing a good job. You're not asking for the negativity. You're just asking, what's the healthiness of our retention right now? Do we have a large at risk? Because if you say to somebody on a scale of 1 to 5, how happy are you in your role, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best, and across the board you get 4s and 5s, you've got a pretty motivated, employment base to come to work. It's when you're starting to see the 2s, right, and the 1s, and you talk about the variety in your work, and you ask the questions that you want to know, and you truly give them that option to be anonymous. And just the fact that you've asked them the question, and then if you keep doing it every month, they start to think that you care, right? Without being told, because you've asked their opinion every single month. And it's asking it on the company, it's asking it on the supervisors. We do it across the board to all of our contract employees. We ask them, do you like your assignment? Do you like your supervisor? Do you like the company? Do you like us? If you could list anything that you would change, what would it be? And a lot of it is pay rate, right? Pay rate, pay rate, pay rate. I can't control it too much. I see some hands. Brian.
So when talking about attrition and what impacts that, and I'll explain a lot of this in my meeting that we do next month. But when we deployed our conversational AI, we actually dropped our attrition in half. So it was a huge impact, and I'll explain how all that happened in my meeting. But
okay, that's like a cliffhanger. You can't do that.
So
you could at least give us the high level reason. Jeez.
You'll have to basically it reduced the number of the simple calls that my agents were handling that they didn't really want to handle. It reduced a lot of that. So it actually, then I was able to reduce my total number of staff, which then I kept my people that were, most of your attrition, you're going to in your call center. Well, you have 100% attrition. It's not, you don't turn your whole staff over. You turn 25% of your staff over 3 and 4 times, right? And so if you can take a lot of that volume away, then it allows you to now, instead of doing new hire training all the time, I'm doing a lot of upscaling training and helping people get more skills and getting better, feeling better about their job and being more knowledgeable, which gives a better customer experience. And so it was, I'll explain a lot of that in my, like I said, in my seminar we do next month. But those are some of the benefits that you do. And I think the agents see that when they're saying, hey, I'm getting skilled, I'm getting trained on more things, being able to do better, increase my bonuses, incentives, because I'm no longer just taking calls to transfer calls somewhere. I'm taking revenue producing calls, which increases my income. So a lot of those things is how we saw a big reduction in that and be able to start to train and get more knowledge. So
that's awesome. And Patrick?
Yes. Well, my thought is, because if you're doing something that is anonymous, that's great. The biggest challenge is making sure that you're showing that you're not only listening to them, but you're making changes to what they are concerned about. Just because filling out a thing is great, but if you're not actually implementing some changes and showing them, hey, I'm listening to you, and I'm also implementing some of the changes that you have suggested, I think that's a great, by doing that, it's a great way to let people know, hey, I'm listening and you are important to me. Your voice matters. And it's not going to be for everything, but if they see that other people's opinions or maybe best practices are being showcased, then they'll be more apt to engage, and then the attrition would go down because they feel like their voice is being heard.
Absolutely. And it's looking at saying, what can we do that doesn't have much cost really quickly? So we had a client last month that we did what do you think, and the client doesn't do some of it we were doing it on our contract employees, and the client doesn't do it for their permanent employees. We said, why don't you? Just 1 month. Here's our form, here's our document, send it out. So the biggest thing back was that we need more fun, right? It's been very serious. They've gone through merger acquisition. We need more fun. So the managers were like, got so much on our plate, we don't know how to do this. So I run a couple of nonprofits and know how to have some fun as well. So I said, next week, next Tuesday, we're gonna have a barbecue. I'm gonna fly Australian sausages in from LA. You guys are gonna go to the restaurant depot. You're gonna buy this type of food. We're gonna give away prizes. I'm gonna bring the music. I'm gonna bring the yard games, and we're doing this. And they're like, what? So from Wednesday to Tuesday, we threw together a day because you have to show that you're lit, right? That's exactly it. So we had it, an hour and a half. So it cost the company 30 minutes of extra time on everyone's lunch break, not a huge deal. The CEO came out, people showed up, and the morale in that organization for the last week, and the production numbers that are getting out, it's a manufacturing organization. But we had people from the customer service, the marketing, finance, like you name it, everyone came out. And it didn't cost, it cost me probably $350, because by the time I flew in stuff from LA, and then, my time, if anyone's connected to me on LinkedIn, you would have seen I had my big recruiting trailer there. We cranked out music. I cooked up a ton of sausages. But that is, when I said to them in our Monday, this meeting just past Monday, I said, what did it cost you? And how much more increased production did you get last week? What did you ship last week compared to what you shipped the week before? They're like, we can't believe it. Like it's off the charts of the difference. I said, now how do you keep the momentum going? Right? Because I can only impact this much of it, but you have to keep the momentum going. And we do employee of the month. So now they're looking at how do they give out different employee awards, bringing back their golden broom for the area that does the best for QCs. And all of that doesn't cost much, but the ROI is huge. Dan, you've got your hand up too.
I'm pointing at you, Daniel. Can't see that I'm pointing at you.
I'm pointing at you. A couple ideas that don't cost a penny. Doesn't cost a penny. One is peer-to-peer training. I use the word engagement a lot. You've heard me use it already in this conversation here. If you have an agent that does an exceptional job at a particular call type, and another agent that's struggling in that call type, having those two agents talk to each other is going to do wonders with team building, with trust, with making sure that they actually get a message that resonates back to that individual. So I found peer-to-peer training to be a great way to be able to elevate and create sense of team. The other item, I call it visual guilt. I'm a big believer in democratization of data. Not every leader is, and I think it's debatable on both sides. But I like to know how I'm performing against other leaders in my same space. So do most individuals in my mind. So we share data about how everyone's doing within a team, or even within the entire company that handles this type of work. So in other words, what someone's handle time versus someone else's, what someone's, we have billable visits that we try to book. So billable visits, that's our most important metric. How do they compare with others? And what I found is just the visual guilt of, hey, natural competitiveness comes out, and some people elevate themselves and they engage when they never were engaged before. So that's just a free way to be able to help. And then there's something that has a tremendous ROI that we've implemented, and it's speech analytics. What we do is we look for best of breed call intent handling. So whatever the use case that someone's calling in on, we find the best one. And then we pull quotes from the calls of that agent of specific words. We don't call out that agent except for maybe in a private conversation. But then what we do is we also pull out quotes from ones that do not convert or do not hit the metric, the speech. And we just show both to the group in the training session. Hey, here's what best of breed is doing. Here's what's happening on the other end of the spectrum. Be more active voice. This is what active voice sounds like. And all of a sudden, we see improvements in performance. So if you don't have speech analytics, you never looked at it, I will be here and encourage you to do that. There's a huge ROI with it most of the time.
Great point. All right, a couple more minutes, Kirstyn. I'd like to know if there's any of the ops folks that are on here. I see, Eric, you're still gamefully visual, and a few others. Comments around any of the conversation today. Recruiting, we didn't dig real deep into that, but obviously we've got some staffing folks that are on here. So comments around recruiting, retention, remote teams, attrition, pay rates, anything coming to mind? Eric, JD, and I know you've been jumping in on the chat. Any of the other ops folks, Corey?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was really good information. We operate hybrid, so it's kind of trying to deal with that, and the team obviously would prefer to be more remote. So, but from a perspective of keeping them engaged, it's been pretty easy to do since they're right here in the office with us. So,
what's the hybrid model look like, Eric?
So we're Monday through Thursday in the office, and then Friday at home. So we're here with each other most of the week. So.
And how's that compare to Alcon, JD? And what's your mix?
We are also Monday through Thursday in the office and then Friday at home.
All right. Anyone else want to share their hybrid? Go ahead. Go.
Yeah, with your hybrid, who's noticing a difference in output? Are people more effective in the office or more effective at home? And do you have the data to actually measure it and show it?
I don't show really any difference necessarily. My people that work remote are my more trained. About 75% of my people work remote, but they're typically they have to get knowledgeable in house before I allow them to go home. So my more tenured people are working remote. So it's not fair to judge, but I don't see necessarily a huge difference in performance.
I don't think that we see a lot here from our hourly associates. I think where we see the bigger difference is salary, simply because they're not losing that commute time on the front end and the back end of their day when they're at home. So, there's just longer to get things accomplished, really. I think that's been our the biggest thing that we've noticed.
I will say but attrition in my remote is lower than my attrition that people that work in on site. So
yeah, and I think that's a big misconception, is that when they go home they're logging off and doing the laundry and doing their groceries and doing all this other stuff, and it's like most people aren't doing that. What we've found from clients that we've spoken to is that they're actually getting more output if it's not you're logged in and you're working your 8 to 5 and there's it's more of a flow. They're actually getting more work from people when they are in that hybrid or the remote capacity, because they don't have to leave the house. So there's that. Now you're always going to have the individuals that do push the envelope and go and do the laundry or take the dog to the groomers or do whatever else they're going to do, right? But on the most part, I agree with what you're saying, and what we're seeing across the board is it's not that big of a difference, and sometimes it's actually better at home for output, but the camaraderie and cultural connection in houses, is better for a vast majority of the people.
We're at there's a lot of information in the chat. Maggie, just make sure we I'm looking for Maggie on the screen here. Make sure you kept popping around. People kept logging in and logging out. People moved around, screwed me all up. And then people raised their hand. That really messed me up. We'll make sure that the chat notes get shared with everyone. I know that Hannah wanted to share some of the feedback they got from a survey, and it's in the chat right now if you haven't seen it. Corey, you're still on. Did you want to jump in on any of that?
So, it's interesting, you guys. I'm a 20-year call center vet for home improvement specifically. This is my third call center, and this is the most remote I've had. My confirmation team is all remote, including the manager in Oklahoma. And my agents are now, I have a 70-seat call center here that I'm about to break out into 100. I just actually remodeled it 2 months ago, and I need to grow it again. I will tell you, I'm not a fan of remote. I never have been. The owners of this company are, but I will tell you that my agents make $60,000. My confirmers make close to $100,000 a year. They're all good people, but I'll tell you right now, when people are at home, they just don't sound as good. They create behaviors that are not in cadence with training. They speak to customers differently. So I just don't like it. I wish I came into this company saying, I'm going to honor this remote thing. And I'm slowly shutting it down and bringing everybody back in house. But keep in mind, my call center makes 200 million a year. So I can't, if I don't set the lead right and confirm it right, I could cost this company. Right now I'm selling 5 million a week, right? So I could cost them, if I mishandle, 100 leads a week, it costs the company millions of dollars. And so I'm finding, especially with an auto dialer, I'm finding that leakage is a lot at home. They're just like, they want to autoscope it, or I just don't want to do this right now. And so, yeah, so I wish I
Has
could
that
say,
changed? Has that had an impact on your hiring? And I know we're at the top of the hour. We'll carry on as long as people want to for a minute. But I mean, do you look for something different in hiring to make sure you're finding that person that says, no, I'm all in on the office?
yeah, I am actually, because we're about culture, we're about energy. Yeah,